another installment of Stars in the Wild. My name is Rebecca and I'll be your host today. I'm joined by my co-host Noah Elliott.
Hey everyone.
And we have our friend Bo here. He's the Stars team dog.
Stars mascot, right?
Stars mascot. He'll be joining us for our video today.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be talking about campsite selection and how to set up your tent in the backcountry.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
weather's been great here, so
Absolutely. Perfect weather to get out and go camping and enjoy the outdoors. Let's you want to talk about how to set up? All right, so we're outside. What are some things I should look for when I'm trying to find a good tent site to set up on?
Well, today we're out here at the Stars Ranch and we're gonna set up our tent here. This is actually a prime example of something that you shouldn't be doing when you set up your tent in the backcountry.
Okay.
But because we're not actually gonna be sleeping in this tent tonight, it's great for informational purposes. So one of the reasons we wouldn't wanna set up a tent here is because there's a ton of tall grass here. When you're setting up your tent and choosing a site, you should make sure that you're not gonna be putting your tent on any sort of vegetation like grass or flowers.
Why would I not want to set my tent up on grass or flowers?
Well, when we're spending time in the wilderness, we really want to make sure that we're practicing LNT, which means leave no trace.
Oh.
We want the area that we spent time in while we were in the outdoors to look exactly the same when we leave as it looked when we arrived.
Oh, awesome. What else should I look out for?
One thing that's really important when you're choosing a tent site is to make sure that it's flat. As you can imagine, if you were to set up your tent on an incline, either your feet would be downhill or your head would be downhill while you're sleeping all night. And that would be really uncomfortable.
Right?
Yeah, all the blood goes to your feet or all the blood goes to your head and it's
Yeah.
really hard to sleep. So choosing an area that's flat to set your tent up on is really important. But with that being said, you want to make sure that you don't set up your tent in a valley because a lot of water might pool there if it happens to rain, especially here in Colorado.
Right.
It randomly rains all the
All the
time in the
time.
summer. So
Yeah.
just to be safe, you should make sure to choose a site that's a little bit higher up.
Okay, perfect. You want to get started on setting up the tent?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right, so first things first, we're gonna go over all the parts of our tent. In my hand right here, I have a bag of stakes, and these are what we're gonna use to secure our tent to the ground where we decided to set it up.
What do we have here?
Noah is nicely handing me our tent poles. So these will come in a variety of different versions depending on what kind of tent you have. Sometimes they'll be two different sets of poles, sometimes they're all connected. Most of them pull out like this, and there's a little sliding mechanism and it has some elastic inside of it. And if I can do this with one hand,
You can do it.
you'll slide it in just like that and they'll all connect. And so then when you go to put it away, you can put it down really small. The other parts of the tent that are important for us to know is that this is our tent itself. Sometimes your tent will come with something that's called a footprint, and that's to put underneath your tent to protect the bottom of it. And then on this side, we have our tent fly, and this is to protect you from wind. It makes it easier to sleep if there's a full moon, so it's not so bright. And it also protect you from rain if you get stuck in a storm. All right, so we are gonna set up our tent now. First thing that you should do once you've picked your campsite using all of the information that I gave you before is the last thing to do is check underneath your tent to make sure that there aren't any big sticks or rocks under here. If you set up your tent and then go lay inside of it, it might rip a hole in the bottom of your tent, which would really suck.
Yeah, that's
so
no
a good rule of thumb is to look down and then also look up. Right now we're in the middle of a field, so there's no trees here. But if you were camping in more of a foresty area, you'd want to make sure that none of the trees above you had any dead branches. If it got windy or it started raining a lot, some of them might rip off. Not common, but it's just a good thing to look out for. So the first thing that you're gonna do when you're setting up your tent is you're gonna get your tent stakes. I'm gonna put one of these in one corner and then Noah's gonna finish out the rest. So as I mentioned before, they have a sharp little side. You're gonna take that side. You're gonna take one of these little straps on the side and you're gonna put the stake in it and then put it in the ground. So I'm gonna do that on this side. And you can just push them in with your shoes. Sometimes if you set your tent up somewhere that has really thick dirt, yeah, Noah's gonna do the rest of these. You wanna pull it really taut also to make sure that there isn't any extra space in between them. But usually you can put them in with your shoes if you have shoes or hiking boots on. If you ever get to a campsite where you're having a lot of trouble, you can also find like a rock that's the size of your hand and just hit it in. And sometimes I do that when the grounds is a little more thick and I can't get it in with just my shoe. So we'll see how Noah pulled out this front side pretty taut. He's gonna do the same thing with this side one, and then I can put this final one in over here, and we'll be all staked out. And we can move on to step 2. The second thing that you'll want to do once you have your tent staked out is take out your tent poles. So these are going to be put into your tent to keep it standing upright so that you can get inside of it. Noah, do you want to try and put together the other half of this?
Yes, I will.
As I mentioned earlier and was struggling to do, you just slide them into these little notches. There's all different kinds of tent poles. This one is one of our coworkers, and I've actually never set it up before, so you guys might get to see me mess up setting this tent.
Right.
But this one has this one big one that is interchangeable front and back. And then in Noah's hand, you guys will see another smaller piece, and that we'll put in at the very end. So what I like to do is lay it out over the top of my tent to start with.
The tent.
And these little corner pieces, you guys can see that they kind of have a little notch in them here. You're gonna take those, and there's a little grommet on the bottom down here. I might actually just take this stake out to show you guys. This little grommet, you're gonna put it right in here, and that's how your tent is gonna stay upright. So Noah's gonna start doing it on the back side. I'll put that in on the front side, and we should be good to go. It's nice to have a partner when you do this, because if you're doing this by yourself, sometimes it gets a little tricky. You'll go to put in 2 of them, and then you'll put the 3rd one in, and then one of them will pop back out. So if you're camping with a buddy, make sure that both of you are here to set the tent up.
Buddy camping's the best anyway.
Perfect. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is clip these little clips right here onto the poles. So these are what's gonna keep your tent standing upright so that you can go inside of it. And with these, they're super simple to take on and off. As you can see, we're really just clipping them on. I'll clip this one on and then take it off. When you take it off, all you need to do is push up on it with your finger. They're very easy to take off, but unless you do something, they will stay on. So we're looking like a tent. We could get inside of this right now. The last thing we're gonna do is take that extra pole that Noah had. Is it over there?
Oh, it's right here.
Right here, mate.
Right here, mate.
So this one is actually gonna go underneath this pole, I believe.
Yes.
Nope, we're gonna put it over it, I think, actually. And we are going to put it in these little buggers.
Pops in.
And it pops right in there.
No
And
problem.
we'll line this up so that it goes like that. And we should be good to go. So that's how you set up the tent, and then we're gonna move on to setting up the fly in the next segment. Phew.
So Bex, we're getting ready to set up the fly. What do we use the fly for?
So the tent fly is really important if you're in a storm or if it's really windy. It can conserve a lot of heat inside your tent, which is nice when you're camping in an alpine area like Colorado. It's also obviously going to keep you dry if you're camping somewhere where it's going to be raining. You don't have to use the tent fly if you're not expecting there to be a rainstorm. If it's no moon and you guys want to do some stargazing before you go to sleep, it's actually really fun to leave the tent fly off, but you should make sure that you know how to put the fly on before you leave to go on your trip in case you get stuck in a storm.
Right, and be sure to have it with you just in case.
Always bring it with you. Don't go on a trip without the tent fly just to save a couple extra ounces.
Okay,
You
that's
will
good to
regret
know.
it. So we're gonna start by showing you guys how to put your fly on from the beginning. A lot of times tent flies look like a very different shape than your tent. This one obviously looks a lot more oval than our rectangle tent. A way that you can figure out how to line it up is by using these clips. A lot of tents will have colored clips. So the front of our tent has yellow clips, and Noah's holding the back side, and it has gray clips. If you don't have colored clips, another way for you to do it is to find where the zippers are. You guys can see this is a zipper on the tent fly, and you can line them up with the sides of your tent where the door zippers are. So because we have the colors, we're just going to utilize that, and Noah and I are going to lift this onto the tent. All right, you want to rock around that way, billow this up. So all you're going to do is take those clips and clip them into the clips on the bottom. If it's a little bit too loose or a little bit too tight, these usually have an option to make it looser or tighter on here. So whatever works for you and your tent setup that day, you can do. As you can see, we're already making immense progress. The next thing you're gonna do is get your tent stakes. You should have some extra ones that you didn't use. I'm gonna toss this to Noah. We're gonna stake out the doors. So the door is this area. This is where you're gonna get in and out of your tent. We're gonna take the stake, pull this taut, and put it in the ground the exact same way that we did with the corners.
And Bex, what are these used for?
Let me see. Oh, okay, so these are little air vents. If you're in your tent all night or it's raining outside, you're breathing out water. So if you don't have any vents coming out of your tent, you're gonna get a lot of condensation on the inside of your tent. So when you set it up, you wanna make sure to put these little vent holes up so that you don't wake up in the morning soaked in your own breath water. Depending on what you had for dinner, that might not be very fun. So right here, I'll show you guys how now we can just unzip this and get out here. And this is where we're gonna enter and exit our tent. This little area is called a vestibule, and there are a lot of good things about this that I like. One is that if you're in the tent all day, you have the opportunity to have a little bit of extra space that isn't covered in rain. It's also a really good place to put dirty or smelly items like your backpacking backpack or maybe your hiking boots, so you don't have to be inside with all of your sleeping gear. My boots personally don't smell great, and I don't like having them inside my tent when I'm camping.
So Bex, what should I do with my stake bag and my other tent bag?
That's a great question. Some people like to just close them up. A lot of times, another good tip, bring extra stakes. You might lose some stakes, you might forget some. It's just good to have some extra ones. So I like to put one inside the other just to make sure that they stay together, because you're not going to need these until you put your tent away. Put them together like this, and then you can either just tie them in a little slip knot somewhere onto the outside of your tent, like so, and do a little tie here. Or if you have any areas in your tent that have pockets that you're not going to be using for other stuff, you can just throw them in there too.
Sweet.
Yeah, that was a ton of fun, Noah. Thanks so
awesome.
much for letting me give you some information about how to do the tent stuff.
Thank you so much for showing me. I look forward to going out and going camping.
Yeah, maybe this weekend we'll head up to the mountains.
Phew.
As always, thanks so much for joining us, guys. We'll see you next time.
If you guys have any questions, as always, send us an email at info@steamboatstars.com, or if you have any topic suggestions you want us to cover.
See you guys next time.
Phew.